Everyone thought he was a weak salaryman, but he becomes the strongest adventurer in the world. Rick was an average guy in a fantasy world full of magic and adventures, but his life wasn't very interesting. While most young men would join an adventurer's guild to go on treacherous journeys to fight against monsters to bring back gold and glory, Rick ended up being an average salaryman who worked a 9-to-5 dead-end job with no prospect and girlfriend just like you. After working at the same company for several years though, he decides that he has had enough and throws a resignation at his boss's face. After 2 years of intense training under some senior adventurers, he comes back to the guild to take an entrance exam where the receptionist turns out to be Alyssa, who was his junior in his previous job. She is shocked to see him choose to be an adventurer at such an old age of 30. While talking to her, an older drunk man staggers up to the reception and starts hitting on her. She ends up refusing his advances, so just like a butthurt Tate fan, he decides to assault her and grabs her arm, telling her to shut up and listen like a good woman. Rick decides to intervene and calmly tells him to back off while grabbing him near the abdomen. Suddenly, the man starts foaming from his mouth and gets knocked off, which surprises everyone. But Rick claims that it's just because of drinking alcohol. He receives his admit card and walks outside to meet a beautiful woman named Rhea, who asks whether everything went well. Meanwhile, inside the guild, people notice a handprint on the Tate fan's body, which has been imprinted into the metal armor, while some FBI agents arrive, claiming that this man is named Doe, who is a former A-rank adventurer with assault charges. Alyssa realizes that Rick must have knocked him out and giggles happily while he goes into the exam center, where people are shocked to know that he is 32 years of age. They all line up to touch the examiner's ball, which registers their magic. But when Rick goes over, the ball doesn't show anything, and the examiner gives him an F while he sadly moves away. The others make fun of him when suddenly the ball cracks. He goes into a different room where the power in their attacks will be measured through a slime bag. He remembers how one of his muscle-brain seniors made him hit a golden slime bag thousands of times after showing how easily he could break it. Rick wonders whether this would be even harder as the examinees go forward one by one to attack the bag. After them, a young boy of 11 moves forward who is known to be a prodigy and wielder of C-class magic at this age. He looks like a total twat and does fancy moves before letting loose an incredibly small fireball, which seems to surprise the rest who think he is a genius. Rick remembers how one of her young seniors managed to create a fireball that looked like the sun and threw it towards him, which he barely dodged. After that, several other contestants hit the bag when finally Rick's turn comes. He moves to the stage, but the old asshole tells him that he should simply give up because he wouldn't see much growth at the age of 32. He remembers how he trained on the golden slime bag till his hands were bleeding, while his senior told him that he needs to hit him 500,000 times more to achieve basic strength. He decided then that he will never give up, so he puts his all and punches the bag, which to everyone's surprise, completely blows up and gets blasted outside of the exam hall, shocking every single person. Rick himself seems confused and thinks that the bag must be defective and considers himself lucky. The next round was defensive magic round, where the instructor uses third-class magic on him, which leaves him completely unfazed as he stands there smiling. The instructor commends him and asks whether he used 2th class defense magic, but to his surprise, Rick replies that he was using 5th class magic, which is supposed to be the worst. The instructor thinks that he is taking it as a joke and tells him to buckle up as he will use 1st class magic and suggests him to use a 1st class defense as well. But to his surprise, Rick replies that he only knows how to use 5th class magic. The instructor is absolutely rattled but decides to use the magic nonetheless, creating a huge explosion, but Rick is still left completely without a scratch. Hearing the commotion, a high-ranking knight comes inside named Syl, who asks what's going on as the explosion shouldn't have been so loud, when the attendant tells him about Rick and his exploits, which surprise him. After that, he completes his written examination and comes out of the center breathing a sigh of relief. Rhea tells him not to worry as he worked very hard these past 2 years, but he still thinks that he messed up his practicals. While talking, suddenly the prodigy kid named Freed walks up to him and starts shouting at him for stealing the limelight as he wanted to be the star of the show. Rick seems confused, but Freed starts crying like a baby and immediately a girl comes up and hugs him. She introduces himself as Angelica, the sister of Freed, and tells him that this 40-year-old man bullied him. Rick shouts that he is still 32, but Angelica makes fun of him for being a lifeless loser before claiming that he must be punished and throws a glove at his feet while telling him to fight her. Rick has no intentions to fight, so he picks up the glove as it was getting dirty. But Rhea informs him that picking up the glove means he accepts the duel. It's too late to back off now, and they both enter the stadium where he learns that she is a second-class knight, which is as powerful as a B-rank adventurer. He immediately starts freaking out as he doesn't think he can ever win, but Rhea tells him to think about his training these past years, which reminds him again of how sadistic his seniors are, and he starts throwing up. This makes him feel better. As compared to his seniors, this girl is nothing. While Rhea tells him to have some confidence, as he is the member of the strongest party in the entire kingdom. This brings him some courage as he gets ready, while the arrogant girl takes her stance and collects her magic before bursting towards Rick with an incredible speed. Rick ends up dodging her without thinking, while she thinks that she must have missed the mark. She tells Rick that she used a slower version of her attack, while the young brat shouts from the seat that his sister is known as Lightspeed Angelica because she is the fastest in the entire kingdom. She gets ready to attack once again and burst with a blinding speed, but Rick seems surprised as in his eye, she seems to be moving extremely slowly to a point where he wonders if she is making fun of him, and moves away at the last moment. This time Angelica is surprised as she wonders whether it was a fluke, as only some A-rank adventurers can avoid her attacks. She turns around once again with conviction and charges at him once again with her lightning-fast attack, which again looks very slow to Rick, who realizes that he can run much faster than this. He wonders whether this woman got into the Knights through nepotism, or whether he is actually really strong. While he was in his thoughts, Angelica ends up tripping on a rock and starts spinning very fast, which scares the crap out of Rick, and he starts running away trying to dodge the sword which was flailing around. The sword ends up getting stuck in the wall, while Rick gets scared thinking that this must be some high-level technique that he doesn't know about and feels stupid that he arrogantly thought he was strong. Angelica gets up once again and decides to use her fastest blink step, which is 3 times faster than the last one, but to Rick it's still slow and he dodges it easily. After that she decides to use it twice again, but ends up tripping once against and comes from a lower angle. Rick tries to intercept with his punch, but she manages to slip through while Rick creates a huge crater with his fists, scaring the bejesus out of the girl. Rick comes out once again and tells her that she is really strong, so he will try his best as well. But Angelica is so scared that she surrenders immediately and runs out. Rick is confused, but Rhea tells him that the results of the exams are about to be released and his seniors are also coming, which scares Rick, who has no idea what they will do if he fails the test. The next morning, he goes inside the main exam hall, where every single participant is seated. As one of the attendants, tell them that they all have their admit cards with them, and one by one the judges will send mana to the cards. If the card glows red, then the participant ended up failing and need to try again next year. But in case the card turns blue, then that means that the participant has successfully cleared the examination. Rick is beyond scared, not knowing what will happen as he looks at Rhea for some reassurance. She calmly tells him not to worry and have some faith in himself, as he has trained pretty hard the last 2 years, and she personally thinks that it should be enough to clear the exam. This seems to bring Rick some relief as he thinks about how pretty Rhea looks, but at the same time realizes that he must be much older than she is. Rhea turns towards him and tells him that he doesn't need to worry, as even if he fails the exam, he can always try next year, but they will have to increase the intensity of his training by 3 times. This utterly shocks him as he barely managed to survive through their normal training. But before he can say anything, his card starts glowing and blinks red and blue again and again, building suspense after finally revealing the color to be blue, which means that he passed the exam. He exits the hall alongside Rhea with a smile on his face, when suddenly he smells a very strong scent and covers his nose. The scent seems to be coming from a pretty flamboyant guy who walks up to the dark elf and takes her arm. He introduces himself as Raz, the Duke of the Northern Kingdom. Raz doesn't even seem to notice Rick and starts hitting on Rhea, telling her that she is so beautiful that he is willing to take her for his second wife. Thankfully, Rick intervenes once again, which sours Raz's mood, who looks at him darkly and asks what the hell does an ugly old man want from him. Rick tells him that Rhea is his girlfriend and he can't let anyone hit on her. But Raz starts laughing and claims that he has no idea who a middle-aged man can pull a baddie like her. He notices the adventurer exam card in his hand and starts smirking, claiming that he can't believe anyone can be an F-rank adventurer at Rick's age. But Rick snaps back, claiming that Raz doesn't seem too strong himself. Roz calls him a third-rate person for not realizing his greatness, as he became an E rank when he was 14 and currently he is an O rank adventurer, and also the examiner for the second stage of their exam. He turns to Rhea and tells her to go on a dinner with him, but Rhea sticks to Rick unlike Ethot's and tells Roz to piss off as his perfume is too strong for her taste. Angrily, Roz turns around, vowing to show Rick his place when the time comes. The next morning, when Rick arrives at the examination center, he gets to know that the second stage is going to be mock battles, which scares him. Rhea tells him to hold back, but Rick tells her that he will have to go all out against these strong participants, especially if Roz is his examiner. Suddenly, a guy calls out to Rick and tells him that he is going to be his examiner for the day. This makes him feel a bit relieved, while the guy tells Rick that it's really inspiring that a guy his age is trying to become an adventurer. The examiner introduces himself as Lynx and informs Rick that even he decided to become an adventurer pretty late at the age of 25 and has been hustling ever since. He tells Rick that his goal is to become an A rank adventurer, but just becoming B rank took him 20 years, so he doesn't know whether a rank is even possible for him. Rick gives him some confidence and they shake hands before the examiner leaves, bidding Rick good luck. After that interaction while in the waiting room, Rick seems to be in a pretty good mood when a person opens the door and informs the participants that Lynx the examiner has suddenly fallen ill, so Roz will take his spot for now. Rick doesn't even give it a second thought at first, as he forgot the name, but Rhea reminds him about it and he starts freaking out. She claims that Roz is the Duke of the Northern Kingdom, which means that he must be related to the Knight Angelica, and the boy freed in some way. This news is even worse as he has humiliated both of them as well. The other participants seem to be worried as well, as they tell him that Roz is one of the most ruthless examiner who loves torturing the participants who grab his attention so much that he has gotten the nickname the F-ranked Crusher. Rick realizes that he has grabbed more than Roz's attention. While in the ground, Roz obliterates a participant with his spells, calling him a low-ranking peasant, and calls the next participant in. Rick is beyond terrified at this point as he paces through the room as Roz is definitely going to kill him, and all he wants to do is run back home. But if he does that, his seniors will triple his training, which will be his death as well. So this really puts him in a pickle like Pickle Rick. Rhea sits on the floor and tells Rick that if he can lose so much confidence from just people talking, then he should be able to gain confidence if she shows him the truth as well. She tells him that he has done enough training to easily pass this exam no matter who he faces, and at this point he has nothing to lose and everything to gain. This really puts things into perspective for Rick as he thanks Rhea for making him feel much calmer now. Suddenly, a small person with a hood over him walks over and asks whether Rick would like to know his future. Rick, being the dumbass he is, ends up accepting the offer, especially since the guy promises that it will be free. He puts a crystal ball on the table and asks Rick to sit down, but Rhea suddenly notices that there is a spell on the chair. Unfortunately, Rick disappears before she could even do something, which pisses her off, and her aerial slash cuts through the crystal ball and the wall behind the person who turns out to be Freed. She realizes that it was teleportation magic and asks Freed to reveal where he sent Rick, and when he refuses, she literally uses her finger to slash off his eyelashes, threatening that the next time it will be his eyes. This shakes Freed up, who reveals that teleportation is very complex and even a genius like him can only teleport someone 100 meters away, so he should be nearby. It turns out that Rick got teleported behind the exam center near the beach, but before he could understand what's happening, a bunch of people dressed in black surround him completely. The old butler tells Rick that they need him to disappear for a bit and introduces themselves as the elite guards of the Northern Kingdom. Rick immediately realizes that it's a plan by Roz. The butler reveals that all of them are equal to B and A rankers, so Rick doesn't have a chance against them, when suddenly his seniors appear on a cliff asking what the hell is he doing here. Rick gets scared as they drop down from the cliff and tells the butler to go away as their lives are in danger. But one of the bald idiot ends up attacking the tall orc, who doesn't even move as the blade breaks off the moment it touches his skin. The bald idiot tries to punch him now, but Ash simply grabs his fist and breaks it completely. This doesn't seem to shock the other senior, while the baldy has no idea what to do. To his surprise, Orc pulls a redo of healer on him and heals his arm, telling him to practice some more. The blonde American senior tells Rick not to worry as he will peacefully resolve it like Texans do, before immediately pulling out an R-15 from his ass. The guards end up attacking him, But you should never bring a knife to a gunfight, as he simply uses magical bullets to blast them down while Rick watches in horror. Suddenly one of the guard grabs the little demon girl called Alice at knife point and tells the seniors to drop their weapons. Rick is horrified and tells them to let the girl go for their own sake, while Alice simply thinks that these men are playing a game. The guy ends up smacking her head, which pisses her off, so she blasts them away immediately. The butler slowly realizes who these people are as he recognizes the lowly to be Alice the vampire mage, who is the strongest mage on Earth. He also recognizes Eld the American, who has gotten funding from the American government, while Orc is one of the strongest adventurers on the planet. He claims that these people belong to the strongest party in the world, with only S-rank members inside of it, known as the Fist. Soon enough, Alice deals with all of them, blasting them here and there, while Rick runs back to the exam hall to meet up with Rhea, who throws Freed into a wall. Before they can talk, the door opens and Lynx walks in looking super beat up and claims that Roz ended up forcing him to step down as the examiner and locked him in the room. He tells Rick to leave the exam hall for his safety, but Rick seems pissed as he tells Lynx to relax while he enters the arena as Roz creates a huge column of flame, ready to end Rick's journey as an adventurer right here. While Roz was having fun tormenting the poor trainees in the yard, one of the men above on the benches was looking down while laughing at the scene. This man turns out to be Adolf, but thankfully not from Germany. He has a very unique ability as he was gifted with the skill to observe someone's core stat to figure out what their abilities look like. There are 4 major abilities: physical strength, magical strength, speed, and dexterity. He seems to be enjoying the show as he checks each participant that comes in front of Roz and observes their skill set to figure out how badly will they be defeated by Roz. Another trainee comes who seems to have pretty average stats and immediately gets decimated by Roz's lightning magic, while Adolf laughs his ass off. He then decides to check the stats of Roz as well, and as expected, Roz had an incredible amount of magic inside him, which definitely only an ranker can have. Even looking at Roz for a minute or so makes his eyes hurt as its strong stats put a strain on his eyes. He suddenly notices Rick ready to face Roz, but Adolf doesn't even think much about him, wondering why such an old guy is even trying to become an adventurer at this age. He decides to check his stats anyways, and to his surprise and horror, he finds out that Roz has the max stats in all category apart from magic. Looking at Rick's status for only a couple of seconds make his eye hurt like crazy as he rolls on the floor from pain. On the other side of the stadium, Rhea finds Alisaho also came to watch Rick's final exam, so she invites her to sit with the rest of her party. At first Alisa is scared to find an orc and a demon vampire sitting there, but Rhea tells her not to worry and sits down. The orc asks Rhea what does she think about Rick right now, and without a moment's delay she replies that Rick will easily pass the exam. Alisa, however, is unaware of Rick's strength and claims that she isn't very sure because Roz is a great asshole who overwhelms the weak trainees with his superior magic. Orc looked worried, but when he learns that Roz is an ranking adventurer he calms down, claiming that it shouldn't be a problem for Rick. On the battlefield, Roz commends him for getting from his guards, but tells him not to think too highly of himself as the guards were at the end of the day commoners, whereas he is a ranking prodigy and a duke of the Northern Kingdom. Rick asks why Roz became an adventurer, and the cocky brat replies that he was a genius, so he thought of adding a ranking adventurer on his resume as it will bring even more prestige on his noble family, but in truth he doesn't respect adventurers at all and thinks that they are all peasants. After that the battle began and immediately Roz shot an ice blast towards Rick, which went past Rick as he stood still in place. Roz laughs as he was simply toying with him and wanted Rick to get scared. Meanwhile, Rick tries to calm himself down as he can't let anger fuel his actions as he remembers Rhea telling him to stay calm and observe his opponent at first. Roz thinks that Rick is too scared to do anything, so he decides to finish the battle as quickly as possible. He uses his extremely strong flame magic and blasts Rick with it. But to their surprise, Rick emerges from the flame without even taking a scratch on his body. Alisa seems very surprised, while Orc tells her that a tiny attack like that would do nothing to Rick's body. He tells her that among the 4 core attributes, magic can only be trained and grown till the age of 20. But since Rick started training at the age of 30, there was no way to increase his incredibly small mana pool. Because of that, Orc decided to focus mostly on his physical toughness, and to start his training he made Rick wear 100 kilograms ankle weights and forced him to run through an entire forest filled with demonic snakes. Back at the battlefield, Roz decides to use an even stronger spell from his arsenal and blasts Rick with his wind magic, sending waves of slicing stormy winds at him. But again, Rick stays standing in his position without even moving an inch. This makes Roz a little angry, and he uses a lightning spell at him, but Rick again perseveres through it like a champ. Alyssa is really confused by this, so Rhea tells her the secret that Rick is just as strong as an S-ranked adventurer at this point. But the problem is that he himself doesn't know about it. When Orc was training him, he would lie to Rick that even an F-ranked adventurer would be able to perform better than him while Rick was cracking boulders with his punches. Back inside the arena, Roz completely loses it and starts going all out, sending several combinations of earth, lightning, water, fire, and wind magic at Rick all at once. This time he thinks that the old participant would definitely be dead, but to his absolute surprise, as the dust clears, Rick emerges, breaking the giant boulder in half. Roz is shocked at the sturdiness of Rick's body, so he decides to take matters into his own hands. He uses magic to reinforce his body and makes his fist harder than steel as he rushes towards Rick with extreme speed. Rick, however, doesn't budge from his position and simply throws a lazy punch, which connects with Roz's punch, who gets blown away immediately. He regains his balance and drops on his feet, confused at how this man is able to resist his attacks, while Rick decides that he has observed enough and comes to the conclusion that even though Roz has an incredible amount of mana, he never trained hard enough as he got everything he wanted easily. Because of that, every move of this noble brat is completely unpolished and inefficient. This gives Rick an insane amount of confidence as he realizes that there is no way he could lose to this dumpster fire of a man. Roz finally gets serious and decides to use the strongest fire magic in his arsenal. But once again, even after giving his all, Roz's fire blast was easily blocked by Rick, who simply used his hand to stop the attack. Roz immediately rushes towards him for a sneak attack, but Rick is not easily fooled as he immediately counterpunches. Thankfully, Roz managed to change his body to steel, which barely saved him from being pulverized. He shakes the dust off from his body, but even after all this, he is not ready to acknowledge Rick's skills and calls it a coincidence. This enrages Rick as he remembers all the training he had to undergo, like surviving in the nest of a dragon, running through explosions, and even drowning in a venomous pond. Eld remembers how he pushed him off a cliff, and how Alice crushed him beneath a rock, and how he got hit by falling logs while training with Rhea. Thankfully, Orc knows a special healing magic that can revive a man if he died very recently, and that's how Rick managed to push past his limits. Back in the arena, Roz uses his earth magic to bind Rick with very strong roots, and alongside that, he starts chanting a long spell which creates a bunch of roots around him that completely envelop him. Soon he becomes attached to the tree golem and tells Rick to say his prayers as he is not leaving this arena alive. Rick creates a small air shot, which is one of the most basic magic in this world, but he is confident in it because he has practiced this magic over 1,000,000 times. He breaks through the roots that were binding him while Roz comes down to finish him off with a magical punch. Rick also throws a punch and both of them clash in the middle of the arena as a huge shockwave is sent all over. At first Roz was confident in his power, but to his surprise, Rick's air shot completely overpowers his magic and his tree golem explodes into small pieces, blasting Roz back into the benches where he lay unconscious, while everyone in the stadium is unable to believe that the strongest examiner just got his ass handed to him by a trainee. Later on, Rick meets up with his friends who all congratulate him on passing the test, but before they could head down to get some lunch, Roz enters with his siblings. He tells Rick that he will make sure that he is the examiner again when Rick takes his promotion exam, and promises to defeat him next time before walking away. Later that evening, the results for the passing adventurers are unveiled, and while the others were feasting in the tavern, Rick and Rhea were eagerly waiting for his name to be called out, wondering how many adventures await them in the future. As the names are called out one by one, Rick appears rather calm. Rhea asks him how can he be so calm so suddenly when he was a nervous mess during the test earlier. He tells her that he just recalled something important, and then begins thinking about a story he read during his childhood. In the story of the adventurer called Yamato, the name of the greatest monster in the world, Kaiser, was mentioned. It was said that anyone who defeats the ultimate monster could obtain a treasure that would fulfill his each and every wish. Inspired by this story, the young Rick told his parents about his dream of becoming an adventurer. However, his parents were not supportive of his dreams at all, just like my parents. His dad told him that the book and the stories inside it are just fairy tales, so no ultimate monster or treasure exists, while his mother told him that becoming an adventurer was too risky and she didn't want him to put himself in danger. Both of them told Rick to find a real and stable job, and he was disheartened. One day, a doctor told him that he discovered a unique trait within Rick, but there is no certainty about when it activates. Thinking about the unique trait made Rick even more determined to become an adventurer, and he thought that when his trait activates and he gets his inherent skill, he will tell his parents about it. The next day, Rick boasted about his skill to his friends in school, and they began asking him if his skill activates. Rick told them to be patient because good things take time, but as the days kept passing and his skill did not activate, he started getting desperate too. Years passed and Rick became a teenager, but his skill had not manifested yet, leaving him in a constant state of depression. His friends told him that even if he has the trait for it, there are cases when the skill never activates. That did not help with Rick's depression, and his friends suggested that he should try becoming an adventurer despite the skill not activating. They told him that even the adventurers without an inherent skill make good money, but for Rick, it was never about the money. Time passed, and Rick got a job as a guild receptionist, making both his conservative parents really happy. He began his life as a boring office worker, dealing with fat stacks of documents each day and helping various adventurers. In between all this, he kept trying to manifest his inherent skill somehow, but it was all to no avail. He kept getting farther and farther away from his dream and lost his enthusiasm for life. A spark of light came in his life when the pretty Alyssa joined the guild as his junior, but while Rick was still without a girlfriend, his friends started having kids. Then one day, he finally shut down his favorite book that showed him the dream of becoming the greatest adventurer and put it in a shelf, never to open it again. One day, he helped the novice Alyssa with her work and gave her some tips as her senior. He also advised her to make necessary preparations to post some emergency quests because monster hunting season was close by. Just as she left, one of Rick's adventurer friends named Zaid came there in a very good mood. He showed off his B rank medal to Rick, saying that he finally got promoted, and Rick masked his jealousy and congratulated him. At night, Rick got drunk and began comparing himself with Zaid, who had started his adventuring journey just as he became a receptionist. In the past decade, he had been stuck at his job, doing the same thing every day, while other people were living the life he desired. Rick lay on the cool grass and stared at the sky while thinking that even though he didn't get what he wanted, he had a stable job and no major complaints about life. His thoughts immediately wandered to what would have happened if he became an adventurer, but he decided that it was no use thinking about it. Just then, Rick heard some people screaming about a monster attack, and he rushed to help them because he thought he knew the situation well. He went towards the danger zone, anticipating a low-rank monster, but to his utter shock, he found a giant troll, which was a mid-rank monster. He panicked, and just then, a white-haired maid passed right in front of him after shopping for grocery. Rick reached in front of her to protect her from the monster, but the maid told him to get aside. She instantly slashed the giant troll into dozens of pieces, and then told the flabbergasted Rick that she appreciates her gesture, but she doesn't need her help because she was an adventurer. That was the first time Rick met Rhea. He walked her home while thanking her for saving him. They introduced themselves, and then Rick asked Rhea if she was a B-rank adventurer because she was really strong. Rhea showed him her S-rank medal, and Rick was left astonished because the S-rank adventurers were so elite that their name had been removed from guild registry and the main office handled them directly. After getting over his surprise, Rick expressed his desire to ask a question to Rhea and requested her not to laugh. Rhea told him that she had not laughed since she was 8 and told Rick to ask freely. He nervously told her about his dream to defeat Kaiser and told her about his inherent skill that had not activated yet. He asked her if a 30-year-old man like him could become an adventurer at his age, and Rhea replied that when he tried to save her earlier, he showed that he had the courage to become an adventurer. However, since he was in his 30s, his mana capacity had no chance of being improved now, and Rhea told Rick that just because of that reason, he will never make it as an adventurer. Rick felt the last link he had with his childhood dream shatter, but he acted like he was relieved that he could finally give up his dream after getting accurate opinion from an expert. He tried to change the topic by joking that they should have dinner together sometimes, and to his utter surprise, Rhea agreed and even suggested that they could go to dinner tomorrow itself. Because of that, Rick was in a great mood the next day, and at night, he hopped gleefully as he headed to Ria's place. However, a bunch of people came running from that direction, yelling about a monster attack, and Rick was disheartened. He rushed to the scene and found that Ria already had things under control. Just then, more monsters approached from the forest, and Ria told Rick to take shelter because he would be a liability otherwise. She then took needle-sized blades out of her thigh straps, and just with those tiny blades, she manages to slash down the giant monsters in front of her with ease. Rick was dumbfounded to see her abilities, but just as Ria finished dealing with the monsters, she felt a familiar mana that reminded her of the time her village was completely annihilated by a monster. The mana causes her PTSD to surface, and she screams and groans in pain. Rick rushes to support her, and then suddenly, a giant ape monster arrives there. It is about to attack Rick and Ria, but just then, Zaid arrives there and saves them. He asks Rick why did he chose this monster-infested place for his date, and then told him to get back while he handles things. 2 more adventurers came to back him up, and they combined their powers to freeze the monsters using ice magic. And then Zaid enchanted his axe with wind magic, slashing through all of them in ease. While Rick was being jealous of the adventurers, Ria told him that danger is approaching them, and they need to evacuate. She told him that the B-rank adventurers here are nowhere strong enough to fight the monster that is coming. Rick asked her what she is talking about, and she told him that a dragon is approaching them. Rick couldn't believe her even though she told him that whenever she senses a dragon's mana, her trauma overtakes her body and she can't control her mana properly. Just then, a huge dragon appeared overhead, and everyone was terrified. Zaid told them the unwritten rule of the Adventurer Guild that if anyone below a rank faces a dragon, they should immediately run away. But the magician with him got too afraid of the dragon. In the state of panic, he made the mistake of attacking it. Enraged by this, the dragon roared loudly, and the shockwave from the roar was enough to knock everyone down. Zaid told everyone to run for their lives, but they were not fast enough, as the dragon put a barrier to stop them from escaping. Zaid hits the barrier with his axe, but it made no difference whatsoever. The dragon began approaching them, and Zaid accepted that this was going to be their end. Just then, surprising everyone, Rick started walking towards the dragon. He said that he might have lived his life as a mere receptionist, but if he faces the dragon now, he will die as an adventurer. To tell the truth, he was scared like hell, but at the same time, he could feel a small flame burning inside him, nudging him ahead. In that moment, Rick felt like this was the life he always wanted for himself. He picked up a rock and flung it at the dragon, and though it did not affect the dragon at all, it succeeded in motivating Zaid and the 2 adventurers. They attacked the dragon as well, but their attacks were too feeble to do anything against it. The dragon breathed fire at them, and even though Zaid used the iron body defense skill, everyone was knocked out. Ria cursed herself for being unable to fight, when suddenly, Rick rose from the rubble and walked towards the dragon, talking about his dreams. The dragon crushed him under its paw, but instead of killing Rick, this damage only unlocked the inherent skill inside him. As Rick heard the voice of the universe telling him that he obtained a skill, he suddenly got up, lifting the heavy paw of the dragon with just a hand. Ria could see the mana overflowing from his body, and she was as confused as the rest of them. However, Rick was brimming with confidence. He challenged the dragon, declaring that it would be the practice dummy for his newly awakened skill. The dragon breathed fire at him, and Rick easily blocked it with a barrier. The dragon intensified its flames, but even they did not scratch MC's barrier, and then he punched his mana towards the dragon with such intensity that he left a hole where its head was. The dragon fell to the ground, and everyone watched in shock as Rick stood there heroically. However, he immediately passed out because of stress, and when he woke up after a week, he was in a world of pain. Luckily, Ria was by his side to inform him about what happened. She told him that he was asleep for a week, and she had been waiting by his side the entire time so that she could recruit him into her party called the Fist. She told him that the ultimate monster Kaiser exists, and their party aims to defeat it one day. Because of Rick's determination to never give up and rise up in the face of danger, Ria believed that he could still grow stronger and fight alongside them. She told him that he could still become an adventurer, and Rick was shaken by her words because it was the first time someone said them to him. He shed tears on realizing that he could finally pursue his dream, and just as his flashback ends, his name is called on the loudspeaker, revealing that he has passed the exam. As they walk back, Ria congratulates Rick, who can't stop watching the E-rank adventurer medal in his hand, because now he has achieved the first part of his childhood dream by becoming an adventurer. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe and check out this brand new anime about a human who hides and becomes the strongest leader of the demon army.